I swear to the deity in whom we may or may not believe in anymore in the same ways in which we believed in him, heard them. I can't always figure out how to share things on Facebook. Why is this so hard? Is it just me? I don't know. I'm trying to find the live stream, which I stream to my professional page and share it with my personal people. And it's proving obnoxiously challenging. Okay, copy link. Just hang out. Just hang for 1 second. In fact, while I'm sharing, why don't you go share if you want? It's totally up to you. Copy link, go back. This is riveting live stream and paste, post, publish. We've performed it. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the altar with me, your host, Colby Martin. Super stoked today to talk to the author of the brand new memoir, Baptized in Tear Gas, From White Moderate to Abolitionist, the one, the only Elle Dowd family. That'll be happening later on in the show. Plus, we're doing a giveaway. Like, you can win a copy of Baptized in Tear Gas. And I think you should stick around to find out how, because I think you're going to want to read this book, especially after meeting Elle. Also in the show, I'm going to read a bit from this week's perspective shift, as well as one other thing, if I can remember what it is. All that and more live here on the altar. Let's do this. And then after all that effort, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. After all that effort of trying to figure out, look at that at the top, an unknown error occurred. Facebook, why do you not want me to share? Aren't you doing everything in your power to take over the world? Which means letting people share things on your own platform. I give up. I walk away because I'm here for you, not for the demigods of Simi Valley. Is it Simi Valley? Silicon Valley? What's Simi Valley? Where is Simi Valley? Someone help me out. What am I thinking of? Hey, can you let me know how you are? I see you, James. You are just in time. You're like a wizard. A wizard is never late, nor are they early. They arrive precisely as they mean to. Just like you, Wizard James. Oh, what is up, M. Corey Dandridge? That's a good question. What is up? Tonight is week 2 of Survivor. I think if you were with me last week, I talked about my over-the-top enthusiasm for the premiere of Survivor. It is a show that Kate and I have long loved and watched together, and then recently, within the last year or so, introduced to our children. And so the first half of pandemic life was spent just watching past seasons of Survivor together, watching almost all the seasons. Not all of them. Some of them are kind of garbage. I mean, Kate and I have seen them all, but with our kids, some of them weren't worth watching. I started by going to this website, I think it's called like Purple Rock Podcast, I don't know. And they ranked their favorite, they've ranked all the Survivor seasons. And so I started like with their list and kind of curated my own top 10 list. And then we kind of branched out from there. And eventually, I don't know if you remember this, but quarantine lasted longer than many of us thought. And so we just kept watching Survivor seasons. Anyway, so we actually blew through all the Survivor seasons, and we've been entirely excited and anxious for Survivor to come back, and it came back last week. So tonight is week 2. So we've got family coming over, friends coming over for more viewing party of this glorious show. Thank you, Evan. He's helped me out. Simi Valley is the proud home of the abandoned set of Little House on the Prairie. Why do you know that? That's amazing. Oh, I remember Little House on the Prairie. Good old Laura. Thanks for the help, Evan. Gustavo's here. What's up, Gustavo? Dave, Zucker, are we fist shaking at Zuckerberg, or is Zuckerberg fist shaking at us? This could go either way. What's up? Good vibes received from you, Joey, and good vibes returned. Got good morning from Dave Crothers. That's exciting. I love the international audience that shows up to this thing. We've got Mike Christman coming hot from, Mike, I forget where you are, Atlanta? If it's not Atlanta, you can correct me. Or even if it is Atlanta, you can affirm me. You can do whatever you want, Mike. Hey, there's a little thing I like to do. Wizard James totally made my day. You deserve it, buddy. Let's do this little thing I call the viewer sound off. Well, that's fun. It kind of went like partial screen there. It's supposed to be full screen. Let me know in the comment section whether you're on the Facebooks or on the YouTubes, or I think I'm also now streaming to Twitch. I don't have a presence on Twitch, but I clicked a little option. I think I need to like start playing games. Should I start playing Clash Royale? Maybe that's how we level up the altar audience, is if I also play Clash Royale on Twitch while conversing with people who are doing world-changing things while asking you to sound off, dear viewers. Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, if you could live anywhere in the world, if you could live anywhere for just 1 year, and cost is not an issue here, okay? So, and your job's not an issue. You'll have it when you get back, or maybe you can take it with you. And the cost of the place you're moving to is not an issue because the cost is off the table. And you could only do 1 year. So this is not moving to then live and remain. This is just 1 year. If you could live anywhere in the world for 1 year, where would you choose? Let me know. Sound off in the section, on the YouTubes, on the Facebooks. I don't know if anybody's watching on Twitter, and I certainly don't believe anybody's watching on Twitch until I get my Master Clash Royale game plan on. Oh, it is Atlanta. I remembered correctly. Mike, did you watch Atlanta with a TV show with the guy from Community, the guy who did the song This Is America? Glover. Not David. Daniel Glover? Elle who? Do you know Elle? The person who did the TV show Atlanta? Okay, she doesn't. It's a Glover, right? Donald Glover. See, I knew if I just kept saying Glover over and over again, it would come to me. Oh, look at this. Shane says that Shane got the notification for Twitch. You follow me on... I have a following on Twitch. It has begun. My world domination. Being a gamer / progressive Christian pastor. Although I should probably play more games. Barry Cashman says, you could in San Diego. Barry, that is a great answer. As someone who lives in San Diego full time, I totally support the desire to live here. Shane says, anywhere? Well, definitely a city. I'm curious what it's like in the city. So Paris. Paris would be a fun place to live for you. Again, people, there's no cost involved. You don't have to worry about housing. You don't have to worry about your job. It's just for 1 year. Where would you live? Dave says, I listened to Australia online faith gaming conversations stream on Twitch, and yes, they are. Wait a minute, my head's exploding a little bit. A faith gaming conversation stream on Twitch. So that's like a real thing. Dave, you're telling me this is a real thing? The ideas are coming. The ideas are forming in my brain. Turns out people have already done this, and now I might have to jump in. James says, ever since I saw Mamma Mia, I've wanted to go to Greece. I did a 2-week tour of Greece in college, Athens and Corinth and Philippi. It was like a footsteps of the Apostle Paul sort of thing. And we did a little 3-day cruise, went to the island of Mykonos and Rhodes. And I can just tell you, James, that you would not be disappointed. Greece is freaking fantastic. I would love to go back. Speaking of Greece, Mike says, seeing as how I just got home from Greece on Monday, wow, we are greasy today, people. I would choose to live there. It's absolutely gorgeous, and Atlanta's on my list to watch. Awesome. Annette, hi Annette, welcome to the show. Annette would live in a year for a year at Lake Tahoe. I like that answer. It's a great answer. Because I don't know that you would want to live full time in Tahoe, but yeah, for a year, it's a great idea. Joey says, I've been really into K-pop and K-dramas. I was today years old when I heard the term K-dramas. I've heard of K-pop. I did not know K-dramas was a thing. So Joey would like to live in South Korea for a year. Sounds like a lot of fun. Dave affirms that yes, the progressive faith gaming streaming on Twitch is a real thing. Watch out, people. I'm coming in hot. Melissa. Hi, Melissa. Glad you're here. Melissa says, Osorno, Chile, near my host parents from my year there as a student. Oh, that's awesome. So you were there as a student and you'd like to go back and live there. Olivia, welcome. Olivia, glad you're with us. What is Rarotonga? Can you help me out? I know not what Rarotonga or K-drama is. So I'm learning new things today. This is fun. Oh, I love this answer. Nashville, to see how effective I could be with the church. That's right, because you are assisting / partnering with Grace Point in Nashville, but you live elsewhere, correct? I think, though, Corey, you are like helping with their online kind of virtual community, but you're not actually in Nashville. So that'd be really cool. I would love to see that happen for you too. Yes, it's real. It's done by Uniting Church Pastors in Australia. All right. I guess I got some research to do. Shane coming here with some helpful information on K-dramas. Around 2015 or so. They're pretty good. So are these just dramatic TV shows made in Korea? Is this what K-dramas is? Am I figuring this out? Speaking of, I don't know if this is a K-drama, but I've heard Squid Game is must-watch TV on Netflix. This is not a Colby recommendation. I have not yet seen it, so I do not yet know. I'm just telling you what the people on the streets have been saying. People on the streets. Wait, I don't talk to people on the streets about TV shows. Brooke says, I'd live in Majorca. Am I pronouncing that right, Brooke? Where is that? Where and what is that? Olivia's helping me out. I asked Olivia what, see if I can find your comment again, Rarotonga is, and Olivia says it's an island in the Cook Islands. Very chill and amazing people there. Joey, K-dramas are basically just TV shows from South Korea. Squid Game is, well, okay. All right. Yes, watch Squid Game, Joey affirms / confirms. That's fantastic. All right, well, we have homework to do. Maybe we'll come back next week and we'll report on how Squid Game was. And then it's a Spanish island. So we got island living sounds like island living and lake living and Paris living and Greece. I'm sensing a theme here. People want to live where there's sun and there's water. Like Barry Cashman in San Diego. They all count, baby. Do it all. All right, this has been the Viewer Sound Off. Thank you, everybody. As you know, I write a weekly article on my Substack page. You can go to perspectiveshift.co to learn more about that. And it is called Perspective Shift. And on my show, The Altar, I like to, from time to time, pull that article up on the screen and read it with you. So let's do it. And I have well, there's a little bit of, not burying the lead. Burying the lead is when it's, we're not there yet. That was not what I wanted to show you yet. This is what I wanted to show you. This is my article from last week titled A Dream Come True, How I Landed My First Publishing Contract. So if you've been hanging out with me for the last week or so on any of the platforms, then you know that I am celebrating the 5-year anniversary of my first book, UnClobber, Rethinking Our Misuse of the Bible on Homosexuality. I don't know why I said those words with that much emphasis. But anyway, last week we had a fun giveaway on the Instagrams, and I wrote this post on my Substack page for my subscribers, where I just kind of shared the story of how I got the publishing deal. And so I'll read a bit of it here with you because some of you might be curious. And it starts like this. Have you ever dreamt of doing something in life? Big dreams. Really big and audacious, right? What's the hairy goal? Big, hairy, audacious, whatever it is. The BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. Even one of those where you're like, I'm not going to say it out loud because it might not ever happen. So if I don't say it out loud, then I can't be disappointed when it doesn't happen. Or is this just me that manages my expectations that way? And then suddenly this dream, you look down one day and it's like sitting in the palm of your hand, just seemingly out of nowhere. Well, yeah, it never happened to me either until January 25th, 2015. Allow me to explain. So in the fall of 2014, so this would have been almost precisely 7 years ago, I registered for a conference that was taking place in Phoenix. It was called Christianity 21, and it was a conference filled with progressive Christian authors and speakers and activists. And I thought, hey, that sounds like my people. I want to go to that. I remember like my buddy Richard Beck was speaking there. Brian McLaren was speaking there. Who were some others? Mark Charles, Kristen Howerton. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so I signed up to register for this conference 7 years ago. And during the registration process, there was this application. Hey, if you also want to, as an attendee, you can sign up to do one of the attendee operated 721 talks is what they called them. And a 721 talk is a format in which you create 21 slides that are set to auto advance every 20 seconds. And when you start your talk, the slideshow starts, and every 20 seconds, the slides go. And so at the end, it's an exact 7-minute talk, and you're done. Like you have to start, and then you have to stop right at 7 minutes. I thought that sounds kind of fun. So I submitted this idea. Hey, I got a couple years ago, this was 2014, a couple years ago, I got fired from my church when they discovered my theology on sexuality. And now I live in San Diego, where I co-pastor a church with my wife, and I could tell that story. That sounds fun. Can I do a talk on that? And they said yes. They said, go ahead, come on out. And so you can, if you want, go to my YouTube channel to see. A buddy of mine just sort of held up his phone and recorded it, and the sound isn't great because it's just the echoey room on his iPhone. But there's my 7-minute talk that I gave at the conference there. And if you watch the talk at the end, you'll hear in the applause, you'll hear this really loud woo, like right at the very first woo at the 7:16 mark was actually a woo from my friend Glennon Doyle, who happened to be in the audience that day because she was one of the presenters later that night. And then later that evening at the hotel that we're all staying at, I ran into Glennon in the lobby and we started talking. And I told her how I had this box full of letters from people at our church back in San Diego. We'd done this spiritual practice on Sunday right before I left, where they were writing out people that they wanted to forgive and let go of who had hurt them. And I said, I'm going to take these letters with me to Phoenix, and I'm going to burn them. So I'm going to have some moment where I'll burn them for you. And so I told Glennon kind of the backstory, and it was actually inspired by something that she'd written. So it's kind of this fun overlap of worlds. And she's like, well, can I come help? I want to do that with you. So here we are in the parking lot of this hotel room in Phoenix, Arizona, burning people's letters. So that happened. And I got an article. I wrote about it years ago, and she wrote about it. But when I tried to find her blog on it, all her old blogs are no longer online, which is fine. Anyway, so that happened too that week. But back to the story. So I give this talk at Arizona, and I walk off the stage, and the session ends, and this woman comes like beaming for me, and she hands me her card, and she says, I really liked your presentation. If you ever want to turn that story into a book, let's talk. And I look down, and right like in this card in my hand, I see the logo for Westminster John Knox Press. And from my years in academia, I'm like, I recognize that logo. It's like, this is a legit publication. And this person's name, Jessica Miller Kelly, underneath it said acquisitions editor. Like, holy cannolis. Here I was, and a real life editor from a legit publishing company had just put her card in my hands and said, of course I do, if you ever want to put this into a book, let's talk. And I think I played it cool. Like, yeah, this sounds awesome. Or maybe I'll think about it. I don't know what I said, but it probably wasn't all that smooth. I'll tell you that. That's for sure. Anyway, I tried to write some funny thing about wearing a purple sweater. Doesn't matter. Moving on. So then later that evening, I ended up at a dinner with Jessica as well. And we got to talking about what a future book could look like and how it could be a little bit memoir-y of my experience of changing my theology on sexuality and how that led to me getting fired from my church. I said, but I also really want to explore the ways in which the church has misunderstood and misused the Bible as it relates to homosexuality. So I'd love to kind of craft something on that. A couple months after the conference, Jessica sends me an email. Hey, I haven't forgot about you. I hope you're still interested. Here's a template if you want to put a proposal together. I'd never put a proposal together. I was when I was writing this article, I was looking back at all my email exchanges with Jessica, and it looks based on timestamps that I didn't respond to Jessica's initial email for like 3 weeks, which isn't in my opinion, a great impression. I don't remember, like, was I trying to play it cool? Was I trying to not be super overeager? I don't really know. But eventually 3 weeks later, I'm like, yes, I would like to do that. Thank you, Jessica. It took me another month to put the proposal together, which actually that's fine. Those things do take time. But I also was reflecting, like, and that's the little parenthetical statement. I think sometimes when our dreams do start to come to fruition just a little bit, if you're anything like me, you can maybe have a bit of internal panic and maybe do a little bit of self-sabotage. Because as what's his face? Pete Rollins. I've heard Pete Rollins talk about this, that and I think he's quoting some other philosopher. But they say that the only thing worse than not getting what you truly want is getting what you truly want. So sometimes, like, we don't know what to really do when our dreams start to sort of come to reality. So I might have been a little bit like self-sabotaging, just in case, again, it didn't work out. I was managing my expectations. So I finally get her a proposal, and I was reading that email, and when I sent it to her, look at this. I wrote in there, I said, quote, "And let me know, Jessica, if Westminster's not interested. Let me know so that I can shop this around to others." And I read that the other day. I'm like, Colby of 2015, who are these others? What? You had no other plan? There was no one for you to shop this to? I don't know. Maybe I was just trying to really express how much I really wanted this by pretending that I could just, if y'all are going to pass, it's so cool. I got other options. I had no other options, people. This was a brand new experience. It doesn't matter. I have always had irrational confidence. I'm trying to get better at not living that way because it's annoying. So anyway, so she emails me back after I send her the proposal. She's like, "Hey, my colleagues really like this. Can you write us a sample chapter before we have our next meeting in a couple weeks?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And I got a little quip there about how, again, irrational confidence, how somehow in just a matter of days, I managed to scrape together this sample chapter, sent it to her. And a couple of days later, "Hey, we really liked it. Great response at our next meeting. We want to see another chapter. Can you write another chapter?" And at this point, I'm thinking, good gravy, another sample chapter? Like, is the whole publishing industry a scam where they just ask authors to write sample chapters and then they take all their material and make books themselves? Also, there was this moment in the emails where Jessica said, "Hey, I saw in your proposal that you said you could have the manuscript done by October 1st. And mind you, these emails were like at the end of April. She said, did I read that correctly? Is that true?" Which is, I think, her polite way of saying, "Dear noob, we know this is your first time, so don't take it personal, but ain't no way you're going to write your first manuscript ever in less than 4 months." So she suggests that I change it to January 1st, and that was a good call. Thank you, Jess. So 3 days after sending my second sample chapter, then on June 11th of 2015, I opened one of the best emails I've ever received in my life. "Hi, Colby. I'm pleased to let you know that our team has approved your proposal for UnClobber, and we're putting it on the fall 2016 list. We think your story and style will resonate with people and hope your platform will continue to grow." And that is how my dream of becoming a published author came true. So then, at that point, it was just, how do I write a book? I don't know. So I'll write about that someday. But I just thought it was fun to go back and reflect on how this whole thing got started. Here's a photo of me getting the first advanced reader's copy, the ARC. getting excited about that. Here's a photo of me with my editor from Westminster at one of the conferences celebrating its release. Here's Kate and I on release day, which release day is a little bit hard to pin down because I think it was supposed to come out on September 28th, but Amazon didn't actually have the books. So this whole launch plan that I had, once the 28th finally came, then it was like, wah, wah, nobody actually had their books. And so now if you go to Amazon, it says like October 4th. It doesn't really matter. That's why I'm kind of being loose with the celebration of the 5 years here. And yeah, that's it. And then, by the way, for anyone interested in the world of publishing and contracts and royalties and all that, I also included a section down at the bottom because as a first-time author, I had no idea about any of this stuff. I had to learn it all as I went about how advances work and royalties, and really learning how authors don't really make money. Like unless you're on the New York Times bestsellers list, unless you're like with one of the big 5 publishers, it's a hustle out here, and ain't none of us making a living off of it. Like the average author makes like less than $1,000 a year from their writing. Nobody's making a killing off of books, again, unless you're the one that's selling hundreds of thousands of copies. So I think sometimes that surprises people. But anyway, if you're interested in how any of that stuff, that's at the bottom part of the article. So that's a bit of my story on how the book came to be. And I've got a couple more fun announcements coming up in the next couple days about that. But that is enough of me. I would now like to move to the section of the altar where I take another drink of water. Fun fact, I got these cups from my wife years ago when we lived in Arizona, and I was a Arizona Cardinals fan. And now, or for like the last 5 years, I have fallen out of love with the NFL for a number of reasons, for its violence and concussions, for its really racist policies when Colin Kaepernick and that whole situation, and like suspending players for smoking weed for a year, but guys who beat their girlfriends or their wives for like a game. So anyway, so I had like this conflict of conscience 5 years ago, and like, why am I supporting this anymore? But I still like the Cubs. Okay. And I was saying, and now I guess Arizona's really good this year, at least. Okay, where was I going? Oh yes, we're getting to our guest. Now, would you welcome to the show with me, whether you're watching this live, which means you get a chance to win a copy, or you're watching it later, which means why didn't you watch it live so you could win free stuff? Let's get to our guest, the one, the only Elle Dowd. Let's do it. Good afternoon, Elle.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome to the altar. How's it going? It's going well. There are some reasons that for mysterious purposes, I can't reveal yet, but one day I will tell everybody why this has been a good week for me. You like that? Really? Like, why did I even say that? That was completely unnecessary, very cryptic. So that's going great. And then also it's a beautiful day here in paradise, and I get to meet you. So I get to hang out with some of my favorite Wednesday afternoon friends. So I'm good.
Great.
What about you? You are in Chicago.
Yes, I'm in the Chicagoland area, and I'm just like really grateful for this conversation and to meet you and like get to know some of like, your like Wednesday afternoon crew. Like you said, like there's a whole group of folks here.
They're good people. Really cool. They're good people.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know if she's here. She's probably working because, a lot of people, they work Wednesdays at 2 p.m., which is understandable.
Right.
And some of you watching this are also working, so well done. But a mutual friend of ours, I shouldn't say mutual friend. I don't actually know the friend status. But as soon as I posted that that got awkward. As soon as I posted that you were on, Samantha, what's her last name? Warburton. She's like, oh my God, I went to school with Elle, and now she's on your show. So I don't know if you remember Samantha, but that was a fun collision of worlds.
Yeah.
So for everybody hasn't heard yet, Elle's got this book, and it's out, right? Like we're not in pre-order land. We are in post-publish land.
Launch day was August 10th.
Oh, that's fun. So you're like 6 weeks into this thing. I would love to hear. I just shared. I think you were watching in the waiting room. I shared a little bit of how my contract came to be. I'd love to maybe in a minute talk about how this came to be, because I think that would be an interesting story to hear. But two thoughts real quick. One, it's a pretty book, Elle. They did a really good job with design and the colors and all that. But then two, more importantly, the substance is fantastic. It's got style and substance. So congratulations. I'm really proud of you. It's a good book. Thank you. It's a really good book. And we're going to give away a copy here in a little bit. So stay tuned. Yes. Let's start here. Can you tell us a bit about you by way of where did you grow up? How did you grow up? And how in the world did you get to have that collar around your neck? So three real simple questions.
Yeah, right. Like, what's the whole story of your life? I grew up in a suburb of Des Moines, Iowa. I grew up in Urbandale, Iowa. It was a predominantly, overwhelmingly white suburb, like nice public schools, all those suburban things that like many of us who've lived in the suburbs maybe experienced. And I spent most of my life just like pretty unaware of things like racism or white privilege or white supremacy, in large part because like no one had ever really talked to me about it. I mean, there was definitely some of those conversations in school growing up about racism or as it related to history, right? But it was we really treated it like racism was something in the past and like something that wasn't necessarily like continuing in today. It didn't necessarily have like a legacy that affected today in any real way. Yeah. So, and
you grew up with siblings? Yes.
Yeah. I grew up with a brother and a sister and my parents. Yeah.
And did you have a religious heritage that you were born into, raised in? What was that like?
So I'm ELCA Lutheran now, and we like have been Lutheran, but it's not even like my parents were like super Lutheran on purpose or anything. We were just like visiting churches, and my sister was really shy and really like connected with the pastor during the children's sermon. And so they were like, I guess this is our church now.
No way.
Like my sister was like, yeah. She was like a toddler, preschooler and super, super shy, but like cuddled right up to the pastor during his like children's message. So
that's how you became Lutheran, was through a cuddly pastor who ingratiated themselves to a family. That's fantastic.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's the church growth strategy for all you pastors watching is do more children's moments and be nicer to kids. Actually, if my wife were here, she'd
honestly.
Yes, that's you could not go wrong with a church focusing more on kids. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I was always like very into church, like maybe to like a weird extent, right? Like I was like really, really into church from a young age. I know there's like a lot of folks who become pastors who are like, I had no idea, or like, I really struggled with my call. I didn't know I wanted to be a pastor until like God kept chasing me down. And I was, the like pretty weird kid writing my first Bible studies for the neighborhood kids at like in 5th grade, right? I was like always really, really into church and into the Bible. Like I know you're also like, into scripture and like the push and pull of scripture and the different ways and lenses that we use to interpret it. But so I always sort of knew that I wanted to be in ministry, and like the shape that's taken obviously has like changed throughout time. Because for example, I never had imagined that I would be working in St. Louis during the Ferguson Uprising. Like that was not, or that pastors were really public during liberation movements. That was really not like even on my radar at all, even though, again, we learned about like historically the civil rights movement and stuff, which was led by a lot of faith leaders. But
and I would say, I'm thinking back to the Lutheran pastor who ingratiated themselves to your family, also worked out well for you because that was a denomination that ordains women, right?
Yeah.
I wonder, things could have. Do you think it could have gone a different way? Here's maybe how I want to ask this question. Were your parents, do you know if your parents, your guys' young age, were committed to a faith tradition that had that? Was that important to them? Or did they just it just kind of happened to be Lutheran, and as it turns out, Lutherans ordain women, and that worked out well for you, as opposed to, being ingratiated by an Assemblies of God church, and
Right.
well,
Or
actually,
even
maybe Assemblies of
even
God have women pastors. That was a bad example, but some other
but like even
vanilla
other
brand.
Lutheran churches,
Yeah,
right? Like
right.
there's plenty of Lutheran traditions that don't ordain women actually, like
Okay.
in the United States, like most of them. So um yeah, I don't think, at least, I mean, maybe they'll watch this and tell me, but I don't think that was something that was like necessarily on their radar or that they
Okay.
knew. And honestly, growing up where I did, I don't remember seeing like women pastors. And the ELCA now does ordain openly LGBTQIA plus people, but when I was growing up, they did not. And I'm bisexual. I'm like openly bisexual. And so that was something that was like definitely a source of like turmoil for me. I know a lot of other queer people have these stories too, but just like praying for God to change me or to change the church. And like, luckily, because of the sacrifice and like hard work of many of my LGBTQIA plus elders and allies, like in 2009, the ELCA decided to allow for the ordination of LGBTQIA plus people. So here we are.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I'm glad that you are where you are in life. We need, who's the we in that sentence? Let me stop. Where I was going with that is we, which is to say those who are like doing full-time vocational ministry. And there's a sense in which I do agree with where that sentence was going, which was going to be, we need people like yourselves to continue to be in the game in this way. And I do agree with that. But I think, and I'd be curious to hear your response to this, there's also a sense in which I'm not entirely sure what the future for institutional religion is.
Right.
And I'm not always sure that people like ourselves, and again, maybe you and I are close enough where that sentence makes sense. Maybe you and I are different enough where it doesn't make sense. I don't know. I think we have some mutual friends and colleagues who have opted out of the game for very good reasons. And my sense is it all belongs, and we need it all. Like we need all of the people. We need the people like sticking in the thing to help sort of change from the inside. And we need people who are like, nah, I can be more effective on the outside.
Right.
Anyway, what are your thoughts on that before I move on?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wish I had a good answer because I struggle with that every day, right? Like I frequently wonder, like, what am I doing? Like I feel very called to ministry, and that would be like true for me whether I was working for the institutional church or not. So like, why like sort of like chain myself to what seems like maybe a sinking ship? And so I think I like had reposted an old status about this recently, which now after, in light of us going through this ongoing pandemic, it feels really different to read this. But when people ask me that question, I'm like, yeah, I think because I believe in resurrection, I'm also, sticking with the institutional church, that I do feel confident that there will be some sort of like end or death of the institutional church, but I'm also confident in the resurrection. But also maybe, sometimes the church and I have been in like not a very healthy relationship, like even an abusive relationship. So maybe it's also a little bit of Stockholm syndrome. And so I really, really do respect the people who leave, and whether that means they're leaving like religious life or they're doing ministry just like in creative ways. Like I think, there's some very faithful, good reasons not to make the choice that I'm making. But I also, Nathan Roberts said something today that like made me cry about this topic. And, like, why do we stick with this dying institution? And he was like, we do that a lot in like relationships with people we love, like in a marriage or a friendship. We like see it through to the end, and we like stay at the bedside, and we, hold their hand. And maybe that's what those of us who are staying are a part of. And I'm hopeful that we'll also be witnesses to the resurrection of whatever God is doing next.
I love that. Thanks for sharing on that. It brings up for me the tension, the dance, the paradox, whatever word fits well there, of using the analogy of a relationship, for instance. Of course, there are contexts in which a thing is so unhealthy and full of suffering and harm that the best thing for everybody is for a relationship to end. Of course that exists.
Yes.
And also, because there is tension and pain and suffering and disagreement and hardship in a relationship, does not therefore mean it should end.
Mm-hmm.
So there is space between this ideal where we think that, everything's awesome and this, of course it should end. There is space in which, yes, so much of our best, and I'm sure you know this because you've been with your partner for many years and I've been with mine for 18 plus years now. Like, the best parts of our marriage are because we have overcome and worked through and that. So I find that yes. So in the church world, yes, there are some for whom, of course, the best thing for both. But also, if we all just bailed because it got hard, and I often think about this, we're going off on a tangent here. I often think about this for our current single siblings who are in a dating world that right now, I can't imagine what it would be like to try and do dating.
I know.
Right now.
Yeah.
It sounds so hard, so exhausting, so painful, so frustrating. But I think one of the things that might be hugely disadvantaging them is that we live in a culture, I think by and large, that says, hey, if things get hard, just go to the next thing. If this doesn't work, like, you can have it your way. You can customize it. Everything can be bespoke for you. Like, you shouldn't have to suffer or do anything that's hard, or you can just go to the next thing. And I oftentimes feel like that sort of idea has to seep into the dating world to where, maybe you might know in the first couple dates that it's not going to work, but also maybe like, what if you stuck with the thing? Anyway, how did we become dating talk people?
I don't know.
My bad,
I'm
Elle.
also like, I feel no.
I have no idea what I'm talking about.
I have obviously been out of the game for a minute, but I think like some of that is like pretty gendered, right? Like, I think people who are like women or non-binary people or like other folks, we've sort of been like taught to accept crumbs. And so some of us need to hear it's okay to leave. And then there's some folks who maybe have been socialized into a sense of entitlement or like consumerist model where it's like everything's about me all the time. And for those folks, maybe it's like a good lesson to reflect on that and like what that means.
Good. Well said. Thanks for landing that plane and getting us out of that section. Next up on Dating with Colby and Elle. Okay, moving on. So you have this book. Let's talk about this. Baptized in Tear Gas. Can you give us a bit of a context for what is the main story of this book? What do you mean baptized in tear gas? How did this thing come to be?
So I was working for the Episcopal Diocese of Missouri in the bishop's office in 2014. And a few months into my job, Black teenager Michael Brown was shot and killed by white police officer Darren Wilson. And the response from the community ignited a movement that is historic and has, was a flashpoint in this sort of ongoing movement for Black liberation and our collective liberation. And because of my job and because of the nature of my job, I was working with young people, I got to be a part of that. And so I spent a lot of time out on the streets and a lot of time not quite knowing what I was doing out there and learning and building relationships with these like young Black radicals really started to transform me. Because as you heard, I grew up like in a very white world, in the suburbs, in a place where I was not really like thinking critically about race. And so being a part of this movement really transformed me. And that is why we have the title there, Baptized in Tear Gas, because in the Lutheran tradition, we have like this theology around baptism as dying and rising, like this idea that baptism isn't like a singular event that happens like one time and you're like done with it, but actually that baptism, maybe there's that initiation moment where the water happens and you're in a church service and being received into a community. But actually baptism is a lifelong journey of dying and rising. And so for me, Baptized in Tear Gas is about all of the things in me that had to die as a person socialized into values of white niceness or, I don't know, deferring to authority or all these other things like avoiding tension, not leaning into conflict. There are all these things that had to die in me for something new to be born and continue to be reborn in me. And it's about my lessons on the way, right? And so the things that I saw and experienced as far as tear gas, rubber bullets, sound cannons, all of that. It was like a huge wake up call.
Yeah.
And I transformed from the subtitles from white moderate to abolitionist. White moderate is a nod to MLK's letter from a Birmingham jail where he said, the people who are really getting in the way of this movement is not even the KKK, but the really nice white people who say, yeah, I agree with you, but could you say it nicer? Could you protest my way? Could you slow
Yeah.
down? And so he called those folks the white moderate. And so this transformation for me was from the white moderate to now an abolitionist, which means that I work and dream and strive for and try to build a world beyond our carceral system, a world beyond prisons and policing, where there's true safety and true community and true justice that reigns.
I love it. Okay, well done. By the way, that was a fantastic synopsis. that you did really well. So now let's go back and let's dive in a little bit and unpack some of that. When you say that you were on the streets, I think sometimes that is just a phrase that sort of means like going out and doing work. But I want viewers both live and later to hear more clearly that you mean the actual streets on which the protests and actions happened there in Ferguson, Missouri. Not the streets as a metaphor hitting the streets, the actual locations where these things happened. So you were on the lines, you were face to face with police in riot gear. What was that? This is a big question, but like, what was that like for you? Because you were, if I read and understand you correctly, you were way out of your element. This was absolutely nothing you'd ever done before. How did you wind up there though? Like, why did you go there? And what was it like for you?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a mother of Black children. And at that point I had a 7-year-old daughter. Her name's Alice. Now she's a teenager. But there was part of me, right, that was really paying attention to things that were going on because I was a mother of a Black child. And that had kind of opened my world to learning more and reading more and having those relationships that began to plant a seed in me that was like, maybe the life and world that I live and the experiences that I had as a white person is not everyone's experiences with the police. And as far as like how I actually ended up in Ferguson, we have, when I worked for the Episcopal Diocese of Missouri, there's, 40 something churches over the eastern half of the state. And so I was working with youth in those churches, and one of those churches is in Ferguson. And so as I was like seeing on Twitter all of this stuff go down on August 9th, I was like, Ferguson, like I literally just preached like right over there a week ago. Ferguson, like Ferguson. And so I really felt like I needed to show up, like to show support to the priest and just kind of like be present. And so part of me is like, I also really felt this like strong tug. And so that's the thing that I think, like, I didn't go because I was like a good person or like knew what I was getting into. A lot of it, I think, was like there was this voice inside of me that was like, this is important and you need to be there. And I am very sure that that was not me. It was like the Holy Spirit or, whatever like phrase for like that divine guidance that you use. And once I got there, right, when my first day there, and I was out there on West Florissant, that's just one of the streets, and there was just line to line riot cops, this giant vehicle that looked like a tank. It was an armored vehicle with like a cop on the top with like a sniper rifle, like all these folks with their hands up. And I was like, what is happening? Like I had seen it on the live stream, but it felt really different to be there. And so after that, I just kept showing up, and then a lot of people just kept showing up for a really long time. And so those relationships began to form.
Yeah.
And as I experienced even a fraction of some of that state violence for myself, I saw the way that the Black folks next to me were treated, and it made all of this even more real, the racial disparity that exists.
Yeah, you mentioned this several times in the book, that one of the things you learned pretty quickly is that it's not uncommon in contexts like that. And by context like that, I mean predominantly Black led and or Black occupied protest with a police force or the state sort of being on the other side, you made the observation that it's not uncommon for when it gets tense for them to usher white people up to the front of the line because your observation and your understanding is that the police are even treating people with lighter skin differently in those moments. And so it's almost as though you become a sort of, I don't know if shield or is it a de-escalator, like, or is it just freaking self-defense? Like,
right.
Talk about that a bit, because I found that really fascinating.
Yeah. So there were some, there's, of course, like this movement is not about me. And that's one of those lessons that I learned and had to keep learning. Like, this is not about me. And so, I was not like a leader in this movement. I was like, just like, I don't know, fortunate to be surrounded by such like strong activists and creative thinkers. And there would be moments where, things were really tense with the police, and it'd be like, yep, white allies to the front. And the idea was, yes, that it would de-escalate the police, or if that there was some violence, because there was, and like I experienced some, that would give a chance for sort of the true targets, who we all knew were the Black activists, to like find some kind of safety or to they weren't going to treat me the same way that they would treat them. So, there's a story of one of my arrests where like literally I'm like right there in front of the police and they go behind me to continue to arrest Black folks. There's the story of my other arrest. You're like,
hello, arrest me. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Yep. And I was the first one out. I was one of the last ones arrested, first one out.
Wow.
And there's also the story of the other arrest where they charged me with disturbing the peace, and they were charging Black activists doing the exact same thing next to me. First of all, treating them violently, but then charging them with like assault of an officer and resisting arrest, right? And they were right there next to me. Like, I saw they were doing the exact same thing I was doing, which was standing in a public parking lot in the middle of the day.
Do you find when you share stories like that, or when you talk about that, do you find that people don't believe you? Do you know what I mean?
I'm
like,
sure that,
if they got arrested and if they got charged with that, come on, Elle, they were probably resisting. Like, they weren't.
Right.
They're not just making up charges. Whereas you're like literally an eyewitness saying, except I saw that's not what happened.
Yeah, I think there's definitely people who don't believe it. And part of the reason that it felt important for me to write this, right, in kind of consultation with some of the people that I'm accountable to and the mentors that I trust in community organizing and in Black liberation work, one of the reasons we decided it was important for me to tell this story was that, like, I have a certain level of trust, like, based on my community, maybe my platform, but also just based on being like a white woman, a clergy member. And so the idea is, and this is really why I had started tweeting out in Ferguson originally, was I was seeing something really different in the sort of global conversation about what was happening in Ferguson. I was seeing something really different in real life than I was seeing being portrayed on the news or like discussed on social media. And so it felt like a responsibility to be like, listen, you know me, like my, brother was on your kid's soccer team. Like, I'm not a liar. I'm right here. I'm one of you, and I'm telling you this is happening. And so using that relationship as leverage to like leverage some trust and say, maybe think that this is different than what you think it has always been.
Yeah. You write about this in the book so well. And I was equal parts, super frustrated by it and also entirely unsurprised. And what I mean is the difference between how sort of the major media outlets, and you don't really specify whether you're talking like Fox News or CNN. You kind of just say the way that this story was being broadcast, the images, the videos that were on loop, the story that was the narrative that was being told. you talked about how that didn't map onto the reality of what you and others were witnessing and experiencing. And that must have been so, again, tell us what that was like to be witnessing a thing, then pulling out your phone and reading a headline in an article and being like, wait, what? Why is this? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like we would experience like kettling and tear gas and being beaten by the police. And then the headline the next day would be about how protests erupted in violence. And they weren't talking about, beating people, trapping them so they couldn't leave, gassing them and beating them. They were talking about a window that was broken. Right. So it felt like kind of like gaslighting almost, right? Like I think for me, it was like disorienting. And I think that's probably a fraction of the sort of experience that many people of color have experienced, for generations, for hundreds of years, where there is a narrative out there that's like doesn't fit their experience. And yeah, my pet peeve that I always talk about is that car on fire in Ferguson. There's like, this one night where there was a car on fire, and I'm not trying to like downplay a car on fire, like, okay. But what happened was it was filmed from every single angle. And then for 6 months, anytime anything about Ferguson was talked about, it was just played on loop.
It was the same damn car. It wasn't multiple cars. It was a car.
It was a car, right? And so again, not to say like that it wasn't tense sometimes, that sometimes stuff wasn't on fire. It clearly was. But the view that was out there was the whole city is on fire all the time. And of course, they're not showing the young activists in the morning cleaning up. They're not showing violence that sort of came before that. The other story I share is about, there was like a bush on fire, and some of the outlets were reporting that we set the bush on fire. But if you look at the bush, there's a tear gas canister right at the base. Like it wasn't us that set the bush on fire. So there were, I want to say too, I don't want to like act like the media is a problem, right? I think journalists are essential, and especially the independent journalists who showed up there. Like many of them experienced a lot of that violence because they were targeted. And so like those stories are really, really important. And even with some of the national news, there were a few reporters that I did trust, right? Because I had seen that they would sort of report something that reflected what I was seeing. But there was a lot of conversation that was so much different than my experience. And it really, really was disorienting, and it felt very frustrating to like not be believed, right? Which again, Black folks experiencing this forever, like Black folks are telling us like racism is real, it's bad, it's wrong, it's killing us, it's everywhere, it's insidious. And we're like, are you exaggerating though, right? And the mainline church is maybe one of the worst at this.
I think your story is important. I think your account matters. I think your book is it's a rough read for those of us who might not realize that we are more white moderate than we might be. And so to read you sort of confront that and experience along with you the transformation is really powerful and really important. And so part of what you and your publisher want to do is give one copy away. So now, for those who are with us still live, again, for those who watch this later, I'm telling you got to show up live to these things. Here's how you enter. It's easy peasy. First, go follow Elle on Instagram, and her handle's down there on the bottom, at HowNowBrownDowd. Real quick, what's the story with that handle?
So my name before I was married, my last name was Brown. Okay. So Brown Dowd, How Now Brown Dowd. Yeah.
Okay.
Like How Now Brown Cow. I don't know.
Oh, right. Like yeah. How Now Brown Cow. That okay, thank you. I'm like, what's oh yeah, that's a Susian book, right? Okay, so
well, it's like, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna tell people, go follow Elle. And again, for my giveaways, this is honor system. So if you don't want to do this now because you don't want to leave the live feed, or if you don't have a moment, just commit to do it later and just say, I did it. Like comment and say, me, raise your hand, check mark, whatever. Just comment. Let me know that you plan to follow Elle on Instagram. And then at some point, go check out soulinchicago.org and tell us a little bit about the Southsiders Organizing for Unity and Liberation, aka Soul.
Yeah, so Soul is an organization here in Chicago where I serve on the board, and it's my activism home here in Chicago where I
Mm,
live now. And Soul does a lot of really good, important work. It's an explicitly abolitionist organization. It works towards Black liberation, but really understands the way that so many of these issues that we're facing in our city and many places are facing around, like healthcare and access to clean water, education, all of the ways that those also are intertwined. And so Soul does some really amazing work, and I would love if you would check them out
yeah.
and learn more about the work they're doing. Maybe consider supporting them. For me, I with Baptized in Tear Gas, I committed not to make any money off the royalties of this book, and so
Mm,
any copies that are bought, whether that's the Kindle ebook version or print or the audio version, any of those money from those sales is redistributed to Black activists and liberation
wow.
organizations and political prisoners and bail funds, and one of those organizations is Soul, and so Soul is very much worth every penny. They're like in it for real. The executive director, hey Tanya, if you're watching, like I would, if Tanya said, let's march into the ocean, I'd be like, let's go. Like
Grab my
she is a
flippers.
visionary leader. Yep. She's a visionary leader, and her organizing is rooted in like a deep love for all people. And that's
That's
what Soul's about.
fantastic. All right, go check out soulinchicago.org. And James, by the way, if you're not anyone else who's not on Instagram, then just go follow her on Facebook because you're watching on Facebook. So go, I don't remember on Facebook if it's like or follow or fan or is there a stalk button, social stalk, whatever it is,
Right.
you can do it on Facebook too. It doesn't matter. And just let me know that you're doing that and that you'll commit to go check out soulinchicago.org. I love too that you brought that up, that you made a commitment that any profits and proceeds from this would go to these organizations and to these workers, which even more goes to prove the point I said earlier in the show about authors don't make any money, especially if you give it all away, Elle. Then you're bringing the average down for everyone else. Well done. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's a really cool commitment.
Well, yeah, I always try to say too that again, this isn't this like moment where like Elle's really generous or something. This is really because all of the lessons that I learned, any wisdom you might find in that book or anything good that might come out of this book is really because of the wisdom and the work and the graciousness and patience of many of the Black activists who taught me. So it's like less about like, I don't know, Elle doing charity and more about like, this is where the money should go anyway, right? In the first place.
That.
So yeah. I think in the preface, I like list some of the places and some of the orgs and people that some of the money has been from the advance was given to. And so those are also organizations to check out.
That's so cool. All right. A few more minutes here together. So everyone just leave a comment or do whatever to let me know that you've entered and I'll pick a winner here in a second. Elle, before I let you go, I'm curious if you have a thought on the following question.
Sure.
So your book, From White Moderate to Abolitionist, is your story, and it's a beautiful, important story, and I'm really glad you told it. How much do you think that should be a path that others need to follow? Or maybe a different way to ask that is, do you think this work of that you're involved in, this work of abolitionists, this work of uprooting systemic racism, this anti-racist work, how much do you think this should be a path that everyone should walk?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first thing I'll say is,
I hope that's not a loaded question, by the way. I'm more just curious your thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, the first thing I'll say is that for people of color, like just existing and surviving is an act of resistance. And so like, I would not pretend to say like the way that Black folks, Indigenous folks, other people of color should like, I don't know, interact with like movements, like all the things that you're doing just by like waking up every day is already an act of resistance. But for white folks, especially, and definitely for white church folks, I think, yeah, like it's a way to live into, for those of us who are baptized, our baptismal call to work for justice and peace in the world. It's a way to live out the things that Jesus taught about caring for our neighbor in a way that is like risky enough to make us a threat to the state and the status quo. And I think when we talk about things like abolition or we talk about things like dismantling white supremacy, a lot of times it seems really impossible and it seems like, I don't know, a fantasy or something. And that is why, especially, I think that those of us who are church folks should be involved, because we believe in impossible things all the time. We center a whole bunch of stuff around a guy who rose from the dead, right?
Yeah,
and so we have something to offer here. And your gifts, like, you have something to offer the movement.
We need you.
We need you and your gifts. We need the ways, your insight, your thoughts, all of those things. And so, we want you to be involved, like, because not only, most importantly, do Black lives matter to God and Black liberation is important to God, but Black liberation is wrapped up in our collective liberation, and all of us have a stake in this work. And so we need you. You can do this. You can look back. There is a time coming when abolition will be here, and your grandchildren are going to ask you where you were. And you can say this. You can say, I was there. I was an abolitionist. I'm an abolitionist. You can do that. You can be a part of a movement like that.
Thanks for that. You have this really cool moment on page 70 where you quote, and that's part of why I was flipping through, because I was trying to find it, because I want to make sure to give the right credit. On page 70, you quote author and psychologist Beverly Daniel Tatum, who explains in her book on racial identity development, which is titled "Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?" She uses this illustration, and as I asked you that question and you responded, it made me think of this illustration for that question of, like, do all people need to do this work or do this path? Okay, so Beverly Daniel Tatum says this. She says, I sometimes visualize the ongoing cycle of racism as one of those moving walkways at the airport. Active racist behavior is equivalent to walking really fast, because you know how you can up the speed of your travel by walking in the direction of the moving conveyor belt. And if you're not going to do that, stand on the right and then let all the fast people pass you on the left. That'd be like active racist behavior. Then passive racist behavior is equivalent to just standing still on the walkway. No overt effort is being made, but the conveyor belt is moving bystanders along in the same destination as those who are actively walking. Some of the bystanders may feel the motion of the conveyor belt, see the active racists ahead of them, and choose to turn around. Just turn around. But unless they're walking actively, I love that, in the opposite direction, at a speed faster than the conveyor belt, unless they are actively anti-racist in this way, they will find themselves still being carried along with the others. And I just thought that, to me, is such a brilliant way of naming that the conveyor belt, in many ways, is this path that so many of us, specifically here in the West, have been living on for centuries, with this, like, trickle down sort of dynamic of racism embedded into so much of what it means in our country to be our country. And if you're not aware that the conveyor belt is moving, then just not paying attention is still going in that direction. And so part of what I'm learning from you is that even if a person might think to themselves, well, I have other life callings. I have other things that that are important to me. I have other areas of justice. I have other areas I only have limited time. All of that may be true. And there's a particular conveyor belt that is moving you along with everybody else. And if you are not conscious of this conveyor belt and do something actively to work against it, then you're going to be contributing to the problem. I think your book is,
and you're not going to get like any of those other, like, liberation justice movements that you care about. You're not going to get there.
Thank you.
You're not going to get there.
It's all tied together. Yep.
Yeah. Like there's no liberation without Black liberation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. I think sometimes we like to think that, like, sort of not making a decision or not getting involved is not making a choice.
Yeah.
And because of this conveyor belt, because of how deeply white supremacy is entrenched globally and particularly in the United States, like, not making a choice is making a choice to be carried along.
That's right.
You have to decide if that's the direction that you want to go.
That's right. All right. Let's pick a winner. So I'm randomly picking from all of you who entered. Thank you. The winner of the free copy of Baptized in Tear Gas goes to, drum roll, please. That was a really bad drum roll. Annette Hoffman. Annette, follows you on FB, Instagram, and checked out Soul. And with those 3 heart emojis, Annette, you have earned yourself a free copy of Baptized in Tear Gas from White Abolitionist from White Moderate to Abolitionist. So Annette, message me through Facebook and let me know where to send your copy, and we will get that to you ASAP. Elle, congrats on the book. It was really nice to meet you. It was really fun to talk to you and get to hear a bit about your story. Continue the good work in Chicago, and hopefully our paths will stay connected and we'll be able to hang out sometime.
Yeah.
Again.
Thanks. It was
all right.
really great to be here.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, friend. Bye-bye. Oh, that was so good. All right. Everybody else who entered and didn't win, go pick up a copy of Baptized in Tear Gas. It's out now wherever you get your books. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us here at the altar today. I saw some other questions come in earlier. In fact, Evan Wickham, I don't know if you're still here. You asked a question. I didn't ignore your question. Well, I guess I technically did because I didn't address the question. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move that to my Ask Me Anything segment that I do on the show from time to time. And so I'll come back to that question. But Evan's question is if there's anywhere in my work that I lay out a working definition of marriage from my perspective as a progressive Christian. So we'll get to that some other week on the show. Evan, thanks for asking that question. Just didn't want you to feel like I left you hanging there. Yes, Shane, I'm glad you had internet working. Annette, congrats on the victory. You even got a congrats from Shane. Everybody, this has been wonderful. As always, I'll see you Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific, and we will hang out next week on the altar. Now I got to find the outro button. I moved it. Goodbye.